Good morning, world. Welcome to another episode of Zen Independently Minded. If you are a new or returning listener, I hope you enjoy this episode. If you're interested in more content like this and podcasts in the future, stay tuned because it's only going to get better from here. The world is in our hands. Let's do something with it. So on this episode of MMA Minded, I'm just going to discuss and talk about a question that's been tossed around the MMA community since the official announcement of UFC 249's main event, Khabib Nurmagomedov versus Tony Ferguson. Or I guess it should be flipped around. The champion should be last. But anyways, a lot of people have talked about whether or not the greatest lightweight fighter of all time in UFC or MMA history will be the winner of Khabib and Tony. And just to put it simply, the answer is yes. Both Khabib and Tony, for the past, I believe it's been 3 or 4 years, have just been on an absolute tear through the lightweight division. Neither of them have lost. Last time Tony Ferguson lost was a very close decision to Michael Johnson, and the reason he lost was because he straight up broke his arm during the fight, but he finished it. And I believe, and I think it's the consensus around the UFC and MMA community is that Tony would have won. He possibly would have finished Michael Johnson had he not broken his arm. And then, of course, Khabib is 28-0. He's lost one round in the UFC to Conor McGregor. He's never lost a fight. He's never really been in danger. He's been stunned a couple times, once by Michael Johnson, a little bit of a stun by Dustin Poirier, and then there was that guillotine. But both of these guys are beasts, and they are the two best lightweights in the history of UFC as far as I'm concerned. The only other person I would throw in there is Prime BJ Penn, but that's a topic for another discussion. But Tony Ferguson and Khabib, they don't have polar opposite styles, but as far as technicality goes, Tony Ferguson and Khabib couldn't be different, couldn't be more opposites. Khabib is a very, very stick to the game plan type of guy. He has very fundamental technical striking. His striking coach Javier Mendez is among the best striking coaches of all time, and obviously Khabib is not a boxer. He's a mauling wrestler. His main focus and his main game plan is to take people down, smother them against the cage, keep them on the ground, completely just dominate and take away any sense of power or confidence from his fighters. And he's done it to every single person he's fought. And the reason this fight is so interesting is because Tony Ferguson, on the other hand, is not a technical striker. He's not a fundamental striker. He's a chaotic guy. He throws in random elbows. He throws in random spinning back fists. He throws crazy kicks. He goes for leg locks. He does that weird Imanari roll when he's in danger, or sometimes just for fun to get into leg locks. He pulls off submissions from the back. He does a lot of his elbow damage from the back. When he gets taken down by an opponent, he'll elbow him from the bottom and just do crazy, chaotic stuff. So it's really going to be chaos versus calm. Or another way you could put it, Tony Ferguson versus Khabib could be an unstoppable force meeting an immovable object. People will talk about that all the time, and I feel like that's what we're going to see with the UFC 249. It's going to be a match that is going to be remembered until the end of time. It's going to be an instant classic. I can see it now. If the fight is made, I don't want to jinx it. They've tried to book this fight 4 times before, but I think everything happens for a reason. And the fact that they're fighting now with the title on the line, I don't think they ever fought for. Actually, I believe Tony was the interim champion the last time they were supposed to fight when he tore his leg, completely obliterated his knee. But I don't want to jinx anything. I want them to both make weight, both make their ring walks. It's going to be a super, super anxiety-filled fight, but it's going to be one to be remembered in UFC history for sure. And to answer that question, in my opinion, whoever wins that fight is going to be hands down the greatest lightweight in the history of the UFC. Obviously, that's a big statement to make, but just look at what both Khabib and Tony have done in the lightweight division. The lightweight division is what many people consider to be the most talented and most stacked division, and I believe it is, because if you look at it, I think Dustin Poirier is the number one contender. He could beat anybody any given night because of his boxing and his power. Khabib obviously is the champion, can and already has beat everybody, 28 opponents to be exact. Second, I believe, is Justin Gaethje, and then you have Conor in there. You have, I don't know if Donald Cerrone's still in the top 5 of the lightweight rankings, but you just have way too many killers in that division, and they're all going to meet up with each other, and it's going to be so exciting as an MMA fan to see all those matches get made. But just look at what Khabib and Tony have done in the UFC. I believe Tony is on a 12-fight win streak. Khabib is on something close to that, if not a 12-fight win streak. Maybe it's 11. But the interesting thing is both Tony and Khabib have been dominant, but Tony has actually gotten in some very, very deep water situations that he was always able to come back from. More so recently, when he fought Anthony Pettis, he actually got knocked down. He was able to come back, and really just his toughness is what won him the fight, because Anthony Pettis broke his hand on his face, and he was still able to continue and win because Anthony Pettis' hand broke. But before that, if you look back at the Lando Venata fight, he was in big, big trouble. That was the closest I've ever seen Tony Ferguson get to getting finished. He was able to come from that and get the submission win. Same thing from when he fought Kevin Lee. He was in some trouble on the ground there. He looked like he was getting dominated, and he just throws up a submission and ends up getting the win. So if Tony Ferguson does get into some trouble, put your money on him doing whatever he needs to get out of that situation. And then Khabib, on the other hand, he's never really been in danger. Like I had said earlier in this episode, he's gotten stunned a couple times in the UFC. He caught some flush head kicks and body kicks and leg kicks from Edson Barbosa, who is considered one of the scariest kickers in the entire UFC, in UFC history, because he's the only fighter to have a leg kick finish to the head, body, and legs. But anyways, Khabib's never really been in deep waters, and it's going to be very interesting. There are a lot of factors that could go into who's going to win this fight, but I think it's probably it definitely is Khabib's toughest opponent in Tony Ferguson, and it's one of the most even, like if I was to bet on this fight, I don't know who I would bet on because it could go either way. But I think I've made my prediction on this fight, and I do think Tony is going to win by submission, whether it be leg lock or darce or triangle, whatever the heck he does. Heel hook, he could do anything. But now that I've been thinking about it more, seeing the faces of Tony Ferguson's last like 7 or 8 opponents, it'll also be interesting to see, because Khabib's style is to take someone down and smother him, but Tony doesn't mind getting taken down, and if he's getting smothered and Khabib has his face anywhere near him, he's going to elbow him, and we've never seen Khabib get cut, so we'll have to see how Khabib reacts and if he's able to fix his game plan and adjust and not worry about the blood. I'm sure he's been cut in training camp before. I mean, he's from Dagestan. I don't think he'll be too worried about blood. I think it's a little bit of an overrated argument, but it's just something I wanted to discuss. And ultimately, in the end, all this being said, the winner of UFC 249 is going to be the greatest lightweight fighter in UFC history. Thank you for tuning in on this episode of MMA Minded. Don't forget, the world is in our hands. Let's do something with it.